On April 26, 1986, at exactly 1:23 in the morning, the world witnessed the worst nuclear disaster in human history. Reactor Number 4 at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant in northern Ukraine exploded, releasing radioactive material equivalent to 400 times the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The invisible enemy that escaped that night would claim thousands of lives, poison entire ecosystems, and leave a scar on humanity that still burns today. The disaster began with a safety test. Engineers at Chernobyl planned to simulate a power failure to see if the reactor's turbines could generate enough electricity to keep the cooling systems running until backup generators kicked in. It was a routine procedure, but on that night, a fatal combination of human error and flawed reactor design turned the test into a catastrophe. The reactor's power output dropped too low, and in an attempt to stabilize it, operators removed too many control rods. When they tried to shut down the reactor in a panic, a design flaw caused a massive power surge. The fuel rods shattered, triggering two explosions that blew the 1,000-ton steel and concrete lid off the reactor core. Flames shot into the night sky, and the graphite moderator inside began to burn, spewing radioactive smoke into the atmosphere. The nearby city of Pripyat, home to nearly 50,000 people, lay just 3 kilometers away. Most residents slept through the explosion, unaware that invisible particles of cesium, strontium, and iodine-131 were already drifting through their windows. Soviet authorities delayed evacuation for more than 36 hours, during which time citizens went about their daily lives. Children played in parks where radiation levels were lethal. Parents pushed strollers through streets where invisible death hung in the air. When the evacuation order finally came on April 27th, residents were told they would return in 3 days. They never did. Pripyat became a ghost city frozen in time, its abandoned schools, hospitals, and homes serving as monuments to a lost world. While Pripyat emptied, firefighters and plant workers faced the inferno at the reactor. These men, many in their 20s and 30s, rushed toward the flames without understanding the true danger. They wore no protective gear against radiation because no one told them how severe the threat was. Within hours, 28 of these first responders would receive fatal doses of radiation. Their bodies absorbed so much radioactivity that they became dangerous to touch. Witnesses described how their skin changed color, how they vomited uncontrollably, how their bodies began to break down from the inside. These men died agonizing deaths in Moscow hospitals over the following days and weeks, their sacrifice buying time for millions who might have faced even worse contamination. The Soviet government mobilized a massive response. More than 600,000 workers, known as liquidators, were sent to Chernobyl over the following months and years. Their mission was to contain the disaster and prevent further catastrophe. Helicopter pilots flew directly over the exposed reactor core, dumping sand, lead, and boron in a desperate attempt to smother the flames and absorb radiation. Many of these pilots received lethal doses during their missions. On the ground, soldiers and volunteers worked in shifts measured in seconds, not hours. They would run onto the roof of the reactor building, shovel radioactive debris into the gaping hole, then retreat before accumulating a fatal dose. Some areas were so contaminated that workers could only spend 40 seconds exposed before reaching their lifetime safe limit. They called it a suicide mission, and for many, it was. Estimates suggest that thousands of liquidators died in the years following their service, though exact numbers remain disputed. The environmental impact spread far beyond Ukraine. Radioactive clouds drifted across Europe, contaminating farmland in Belarus, Russia, Scandinavia, and beyond. Rainfall brought cesium and strontium down into soil and water supplies. In some regions, farming was banned for years. Entire forests turned rust red and died, creating what became known as the Red Forest. Animals in contaminated zones suffered mutations and population crashes. The 30-kilometer exclusion zone around Chernobyl remains largely uninhabited today, though nature has reclaimed the abandoned spaces in strange and haunting ways. Wildlife has returned, but many animals show genetic abnormalities, and the land itself will remain dangerous for thousands of years. The human toll continues to this day. While the immediate death count was 31, primarily first responders and plant workers, the long-term effects are far more devastating. The World Health Organization estimates that up to 4,000 additional cancer deaths may eventually result from radiation exposure, though some studies suggest the number could be much higher. Thyroid cancer rates among children exposed to radioactive iodine spiked dramatically in the years following the disaster. Entire communities in Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia live with elevated cancer rates and chronic health problems linked to radiation exposure. The psychological trauma persists as well, with survivors carrying the weight of uncertainty about their health and their children's futures. In the months after the explosion, Soviet engineers faced a critical challenge. The ruined reactor still contained nearly 200 tons of radioactive material that could contaminate groundwater if it reached the water table beneath the plant. They designed and built a massive concrete and steel structure called the sarcophagus to entomb Reactor 4. 600,000 cubic meters of concrete and 7,000 tons of metal framework were used in its construction. Completed in November 1986, the sarcophagus was built in extreme conditions by workers rotating in brief shifts. It was never meant to be permanent. By the early 2000s, the structure had developed cracks and structural weaknesses. In 2016, after years of international cooperation, a new containment structure called the New Safe Confinement slid into place over the old sarcophagus. This massive arch, weighing 36,000 tons and standing over 100 meters tall, is designed to contain the radiation for at least 100 years. The Chernobyl disaster changed the world's relationship with nuclear energy. It exposed the dangers of secrecy and inadequate safety culture in the nuclear industry. The Soviet government initially tried to conceal the scale of the disaster, but radiation detectors in Sweden forced them to acknowledge what had happened. The disaster contributed to growing distrust of Soviet institutions and played a role in the eventual dissolution of the Soviet Union. Countries around the world re-evaluated their nuclear programs. Some nations halted reactor construction. Safety protocols were strengthened globally. The International Atomic Energy Agency gained expanded authority to monitor nuclear facilities worldwide. Today, the Chernobyl exclusion zone stands as a testament to human error and resilience. The remaining 3 reactors at Chernobyl continued operating for years after the disaster, with the final reactor shutting down only in 2000. The town of Chernobyl itself, distinct from Pripyat, remains inhabited by a small number of workers and scientists who monitor the site. A few hundred elderly residents, known as self-settlers, returned to their homes in the exclusion zone despite government warnings, choosing to live out their final years in the places they called home. Tourism has emerged in recent years, with thousands visiting annually to witness the ruins of Pripyat and the sarcophagus, though the site remains dangerous and access is carefully controlled. The legacy of Chernobyl is written in invisible ink, in the altered DNA of survivors, in the contaminated soil that will outlive generations, and in the collective memory of a disaster that proved human systems could fail catastrophically. It serves as a permanent reminder that some technologies demand absolute vigilance, that transparency in crisis is not optional but essential, and that the consequences of failure can echo across centuries. The silent massacre of radiation continues, slowly, invisibly, claiming victims decades after the explosions ended. Chernobyl is not just history. It is an ongoing tragedy, a warning from the past to the future, and a testament to both the worst and the best of humanity.